And I think in everybody's lives, there's these things that, I want to do that as a function of, then do it. And everybody I talked to said that. The synthesis of the people that were in the book that I interviewed in the end was, there's nothing particularly extraordinary about me or my talents. It's just my desires, and I put them in motion, and that's the difference.
Bootstrapped Unicorns, we are back. I am really excited to be speaking to somebody today who has completely inspired me. And if you know me and you've been watching this show, you know I'm a goal setter. And he's actually changed some of my own future vision for my goals and where I'll be in the next 10 and 20 years. And I'll give you a glimpse. Last time I talked to him, he was just, for 5 weeks, he was in Mexico, in his place in Mexico doing his thing. And I thought, ooh, people do that. And I knew that, but he's living proof that location freedom can come if you do the right things. And boy, was that inspiring as an entrepreneur. So Kevin is the author of Find Your Landing Zone. We're going to talk about this book probably at length in just a minute. But Kevin McGoff, thank you for being on the show. And I'm honored to know you now. And I'm completely inspired by your location freedom stories. So can we start there? Where are you today?
Today I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana, 52 degrees and rainy Midwest February morning.
Okay, that's less inspiring than I thought. Where were you before, and where do you hop around the world?
Well, my wife Patty and I have for some years been living part-time in the south of France. That about 2018, when I was liberated from the day-to-day obligations that I had to a law firm, we had a rental property in this town called Ile-sur-la-Sorgue, which is close to Avignon, an hour from Marseille in the south. And we started spending roughly half of our time there. And the winters in the south of France aren't that great. It can be cold, it can be rainy, it's not beach weather. And the winters in the Midwest, most of your viewers probably know what that's like. Mm-hmm. And so we decided a few years ago, some friends invited us who are location independent. They said, we're going to Mexico, why don't you come along? And so we rented a condo next to theirs and keep renewing that to spend 5 weeks in Puerto Vallarta, and we're going to spend 6 weeks there next year. And so, it's been great to not just visit other cultures, but actually to live there. And I speak French. I don't speak Spanish, although I can get things and
sure.
say words, but I need to be better at that. That's another one of those goals of mine.
Well, and that makes sense. I feel like there are some languages, like, say, Spanish to Italian, that have so many similarities. If you were fluent in Italian, you'd be able to move a little bit faster with it. But I don't know that French is one of those that quite does that.
Yeah, there's some similarities, but not. You're right. The Italian would be an easier transition for
it would be. Yeah.
Language.
So I'm inspired by your location freedom, and I think a lot of our audience would have at least an affinity for a goal to travel more as they're growing their business, and maybe they get a little bit more time on their hands. And I'm curious, what has been your journey in life? And we're gonna, I know your book helps unlock the journey, so I want to make sure we're tying it in. But at the simplest, I know you're an attorney. I know you've spent a lot of time in kind of the bigger, you weren't in a solo practice law firm. What is the life that you've lived to lead you to this location freedom experience?
Certainly, on the personal side of life, I mean, my metaphor for I think lives generally it's like airplanes landing on parallel runways at the airport, where your business life is going in a direction and your personal life is going in a direction. And as my business life is going well and going in a certain direction, my personal life I took French as students. My wife and I have been married for 50 years as of a couple of weeks ago.
Well, I'm going to stop right there. Congratulations. And oh, wow, how cool is that? My wife and I are nearing 20. And I think I'm pretty proud right there, but I can't wait to be able to say what you just said too. I guess I can wait. It'll take 30 something years, but
Yeah, don't rush it. You'll have fun along the way, Josh, for sure. No, but so we knew we lived in the same neighborhood, and I joined the Army when I was 18 so that I could pay for school, and had the good fortune to end up in Germany instead of Vietnam. And so Patty and I were writing each other, and she was 2 years younger than me. So I'm getting out of the Army when I'm 20 years old. She's 18, graduating from high school. So we had this grand plan that I could stay in Germany on an open ticket. She could come and visit. We'd run Europe all summer. Well, try selling that on two Catholic fathers in 1973. It's like, went over poorly. And at that point in our lives, we were like, let's not make waves. We'll just get married, and that way we can go to France when we want to. So we did. The next spring, we got married, and we started. Took us 3 years to save the money to go the first time. But after that, we went every year, most every year, for a week, 10 days if you could. 2 weeks was a little bit off. The trips were on those old charter airplanes that were rickety, and we stayed in the hotels where the beds were lumpy and there was a lot of racket. And we ate Chinese in Paris instead of drank beer. But we just started liking it, and so that inspired us. Well, you can't do this well if you don't know the language, and we both had a little training, so we started having tutors, and that was a come and go thing. We were married 10 years before we had children, but even when our oldest Sean was a little boy, we'd take him to the tutor, and he'd hang out there. And so I would say we didn't start speaking the language until probably 6 or 8 years ago, when we were really spending time there and immersed. But we had this huge foundation, and we had this real love for it. And so this is all percolating in our life as something we enjoy doing. And we stumbled onto this little apartment, and some Americans who owned the place we were renting it explained to us the economics of owning a small place in this small town and then renting it out, and it would cash flow. And so we took a plunge and did that. We bought this place. We gave our credit card to a woman we never met to do the renovation. We did that all long distance.
Wow.
And it was all done, and it was only like 250 square feet, so it was tiny. And when we decided to spend more time there, we found a place just around the corner it's 1,100 square feet, and it's perfect. It's in an old building, 18th century. We've got 7 frescoes and friezes above the walls. Looks like a Parisian apartment. It's in a building that's with really good neighbors up and down. And but that journey, if you will, just sort of happened. We were doing things that we enjoyed doing, and you end up, after a period of time, landing and having this opportunity. And I had somebody say this the other day. I get every so often, they say, "Oh man, I want your life." And I said, "Well, you know what? I wanted my life when I was your age too." And it's great to have something to aspire to, although I'm not always certain that I really aspired to this, but it evolved, if you will.
Sure. Well, and it seems like you were spending time with your wife doing the things that made you smile and kept you intrigued, and it turned into this. Now, the first one, the 250 square foot one, you were cash flowing that rental.
Yeah.
Do you still have it?
Over the years that we owned that place, it didn't cost us any. It cost us to buy it.
Sure.
But it didn't cost us to manage it, and it turned into something to turn into a bigger place. And so
that's awesome.
Seemed like a dumb idea at first. Buy a place 5,000 miles from home and give your credit card to somebody you don't know and trust 2 people you never met. Just talk to them on the telephone about the business model. But I don't know. We're either trusting, maybe we're trusting fools. I don't know, but it worked out. So. Well,
I'm glad it worked out. I'm sure there's somebody out there who doesn't share that same story, but I think there's more. I'd like to believe there's more good people who are interested in trying to do a good thing than not. So I'm glad you found the good ones.
No, you're right. That's a point that I tried to make, is that if you ask for help, And if somebody comes to you and say, "Hey, Josh, I've got this problem. Could you help me out?" I mean, you wouldn't turn him down. You would
No.
say, "You know what? I'm not the guy for that, but here's who you should talk to," or "I'm exactly the man for that, and let me tell you." I think, generally speaking, like you just said, I mean, people are they're kind, they do the right thing, and they're also generous with their time if you just ask.
I agree. And one of the things that I've found in life is that givers tend to gain. Now, you don't necessarily gain from the person you're giving to. It's more of your reputation gets built over time as a giver, and people, once they have trust with you, it turns into something that just breeds more positivity. And sometimes that positivity is financial gain, sometimes that's opportunity gain, whatever it is. If you just kind of live in that cycle of being able to say yes and be the helper that the world's asking for, it usually benefits everyone, including yourself.
Right. No, that's very true.
Yeah. So you wrote this book, and it's on the American Bar Association Press. So there's a find your landing zone, and you actually used the word landing like 2-3 minutes ago, and I thought, oh, I almost have a perfect segue, but we started talking about giving and helping. So this book, to me, it seems like it's positioned very well for lawyers, and maybe that's to a degree your intention. But as I was browsing this, I found myself feeling like I'm learning from this too. And I am not an attorney, and I don't know that I could ever pass the bar. So could you, one, just give me the elevator pitch on what Find Your Landing Zone is, and who is it for, and how is it helping people?
What my idea and my intent is to inspire professionals, not just lawyers, but professionals, to stop and the "I'm too busy" train of thought, and to investigate where they've been, because I think that's important to understanding where you're going, but also evaluating what talents do I have and what do I like to do. And if you don't spend any time thinking about those things, then as a lawyer, you get mired in the next case, the next client, and the minutia of your day to day, and you become a spectator in your own life.
Yeah.
And that's where I found myself at one point, where I thought, I have these other interests. I really liked what I was doing. I was at a good law firm. I had responsibilities that I enjoyed, liked my clients, really liked what I was doing. But it's like, I can't do this forever. And there'd be periods in my life where I'd jettison my criminal defense work because it was stressful and taking me out of the house and living in a small hotel room in a small town trying murder cases. There's at some point in time, it's a concession that while I enjoyed this at one point in my life, I need to move along. And so from that, I got this idea. I had a career coach. I had really good luck in the law firm that I was with. They invested in their people, and they set aside a little money that you could use however you wanted to. So I matched what the firm offered and hired a coach. And it changed how I looked at things. And ultimately, when I'm back and reflected 10, 15 years later, when I pulled my notes out to realize, geez, all those things that I wrote on that list of what I wanted to do, I've done a lot of them. And that's another one of those unconscious things where I didn't look at the list for 15 years. I went back and looked, I go, wow, I didn't do all of them, and some of them I don't want to do. I said I want to do a garden. I'm not doing a garden. I forget that. So how I wrote it, because I've been a lawyer for over 40 years, and that's what I know, and I feel like I know lawyers. I was in a big firm, small firm, started our own firm, worked for the state for 3 years. I had the good fortune of having touched on all these various ways to practice law. And my last gig was being the general counsel of a firm of about 200 lawyers that was based throughout the Midwest. And in that position, there was a lot of talk about succession planning, transferring clients to younger lawyers. How do you move the experienced lawyer along in life, and how do you get them to share their piece of the pie with the younger hungry lawyers who deserve to be uplifted both financially and also professionally. And so my idea was a friend of mine, Scott King, we're having dinner one night, and he said, "Man, your life has been so strategic." He said, "I just can't believe how you've done this. You go to France and Mexico and all this." I started laughing. I said, "Scott, you're joking. There's nothing strategic about it. It fell in place." And he said, "I disagree with you," and kind of pushed me to develop a program to teach lawyers how to think about being strategic in their planning, and not their financial planning, but their life planning. And I thought, let me think about that. And so over the course of a year, he and I kept talking. I put this program together where I speak and share some of these stories. And the book has exercises in it that I developed or I took from other encounters that I had with professionals, including my coach, to put a program together for lawyers at the time, because that's what I know. Here's an idea about how to start thinking about what you do next, even if it's what you do next as a lawyer. And I think if I had it to do over again, I would have made it broader, because I've had one of my beta readers was an accountant, and she really liked it. I've had physicians read it, and I'll tell you a story after a while about how that worked out in a meaningful way to myself. But I have the opportunity to do it again and take what I've put and maybe polish it and maybe make it broader. But as you know, having a publisher take on a book is a daunting task. And I was really grateful that the American Bar Association saw value in this project and decided to publish it. And so you can buy it on Amazon. I can get it at Target too if you get on their website.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it is a broader message, although if you read the title, you might say, "Oh, this is for lawyers." But other professionals have looked at this, and not professionals, other people who are thinkers, who are restless, who are learners. It's 200 pages. You can go through it in nothing. And I'm hopeful that other people take a look at it. And my goal is to have, for myself, yeah, it's great to sell books. I had no expectations of being Stephen King or John Grisham or Tony Robbins, any of those. I mean, that wasn't my goal. I think I heard somebody say this the other day, that I wrote this book for myself, and maybe that was part of it, was putting on paper some of these stories that I tell over a glass of wine and put them. It's a different thing to try to be witty on paper than it is when you're.
It certainly is. Yeah. So
it's a challenge.
This book, I'm sure it was a labor of love. And I like the idea that in some ways you wrote it for yourself, but back to that concept of us helping and givers gain. We know that anytime you are helping other people with something like this, it's the right thing to do. And of course, I'm sure in many ways it'll benefit you over time. You said something that I want to go back to, that you said when you had your coach, before you had your coach, you had a certain mindset about your career. And you had also mentioned how your career was kind of leading you. You weren't necessarily leading your career. There were so many things that called for your attention that you were probably succumbing to that. I get it, because I do the same thing. There will be seasons in my work life where I'll go, I've answered every email, I've done everything, I've done nothing for myself because I've been dragged around. I haven't been leading the flow of my own life. And so, I get it. I feel where you might have been, but I'm curious, how do you characterize what that mindset shift was when that coach started bringing a new awareness to you? What is that awareness?
I think the awareness is the stopping for a minute to think about what's important. Because what was important when I first started in the law, and I didn't know a lawyer growing up. There's one lawyer who's the father of two boys that I went to school with. I never knew lawyers. I didn't know generally what lawyers did. My dad watched Perry Mason. I hated that. Took up the TV with that program. But I think and this isn't specific to lawyers. It's like your work, right? I mean, you're in it at a certain point in time to be the best at what you can be at that job or that profession or that startup or that entrepreneurial endeavor. And that sometimes it can exclude what is around you, including your loved ones, because it's so, you're so driven. You have the personality that you're going to drive this thing. And it isn't, I never did reach the top of the mountain, but I certainly reached a point where I thought, okay, I really enjoyed this. And it wasn't like I neglected my family. I coached kids sports and
Yeah.
did sort of
Awesome.
that kind of stuff. But it's like, this isn't what I'm going to do forever. And if I don't somehow stop and take some time for myself, I'm going to be disappointed. And so what Mark, my Hirschman, who's my coach, he made me write a list of 100 things. What do you want to do? And they're in the back of the book. I put what I thought at my age 50-something self is what I want to do. And that made me stop and think, one of the exercises, what's keeping you back? Make that list. Is it economics? And a lot of times you find what's keeping you back is just not getting off the couch. And what I took inspiration from too is I think people find inspiration from various things, and sometimes when you're not looking for it. But there's a French man, his name is Marcel Pagnol. He was a school teacher who started writing plays. Well, the plays became famous. Then motion pictures came in, so plays are gone. So he turns his plays into motion pictures. He has a studio. He's in his 60s, early 60s when he retires, and he's a storyteller, and he's having lunch with his friend who happens to be the owner of Elle magazine, the publisher.
Wow.
And she said, why don't you write me? I love stories about your childhood. Are cool. Why don't you write them down? So he does. She sends the messenger over and says, hey, that first story's due. It's going to be published next week. The guy shows up on the bicycle to pick up the story, and Pagnol says, hey, I need to put some finishing touches on it. Why don't you sit in the garden for a minute? Goes inside and writes the story, gives it to the messenger. The thing becomes a hit. And so that's the spark to him to end up writing books that became popular. And that's something that I took. This guy, okay, he's a famous man, and he's got this talent that I don't have in terms of the arts and whatnot. But he totally shifted gears and became an author when he was 60-some years old. And I thought, well, I don't know. Why can't I do that? He gets up in the morning the same as I do. And when I started on this book, I began to talk to people about, we have some neighbors. They ran 50 marathons, and they didn't start until Tom was 44 years old.
Wow.
So I'm talking to them. I said, tell me about that. He said, yeah, one day Deb said, let's do a marathon. So he trains for it and runs, and they set this goal of running one in every 50 states. They meet at the last marathon, some people on their bicycles. What are you guys doing? Oh, we're riding our bike from the state of Washington across to Maine. I said, that sounds interesting. Tom has a dusty old bike in the garage. He takes out, rides it. Said, it's kind of fun. Right now, they just rode across Texas. They've ridden across the U.S. 3 times. They've gone up and down the Great Divide. But if you talk to them, it's like there are, in my opinion, ordinary people who've done extraordinary things. But it was nothing more than saying, let's do it. And I think that's what I like to impress upon people is that we all have our own talents.
Yeah.
Obviously. And you have limits. I'm not going to play the violin. The Indiana Pacers aren't drafting me. I can't even touch the net. So, but, and I think in everybody's lives, there's these things that, I want to do that as a function of, then do it. And everybody I talked to said that. The synthesis of the people that are in the book that I interviewed in the end was, there's nothing particularly extraordinary about me or my talents. It's just my desires, and I put them in motion, and that's the difference.
That's amazing. So I want to get onto the doctor's story because you got me intrigued, but I feel like there's probably people and I've even struggled with this every once in a while because my own career has had an interesting trajectory where I've owned some businesses, some things haven't gone well, I've had to rebuild. And so based on my 20-year-old goals, I might have a 20-year-old might look in at 43-year-old Josh today and go, yeah, you're a little bit behind the curve, buddy. And so there's moments where if it's a hard day, I might be that guy who goes, oh, maybe the door is closed, maybe the opportunity is passed. And then, at the same time, I'll remind myself that Colonel Harlan Sanders from KFC didn't hit fame or even he was selling out of the back of his station wagon fried chicken all the way to the age, I believe, 67 before somebody said, we need to do brick and mortar, this is a thing. And he became the success that we know after 67 years old. So it's not too late. So I get it. But how do you, I mean, is this book a little bit of a permission to say it's not too late? Where do you get the awareness that it's not too late?
No, absolutely. I think that time is not an abundant commodity, right?
Right.
And so the opportunity to start something, John Paul Stevens, who was on the United States Supreme Court, he retired and wrote 3 books after he was done with the court. First one was published when he was 91 years old, last one when he was 99.
Wow.
And so I think, I think that that age is a number. My mom, who lived to be nearly 92, she said that repeatedly to us. When she was a vibrant woman, she played bridge and was engaging and fun to be around. And if the age thing came up, she'd say, it's just a number, Now, she's also pretty, my brother and I said, I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and one brother and I said, we're going to go to Morocco, Mom, and ride camels. She goes, you boys should have done that when you were younger. I said, Mom, what about the ages? No meaningful, but anyway.
Well, I'm with the do it now idea. I don't know how camel riding actually feels on the back, but whatever.
I've done it. It's not, my wife will never do it again, I'll tell you that.
Oh, really? Yeah, I remember being on a camel when I was like 7 or 8 years old. It's one of those, carnival things. And I remember how itchy they were. That's the only thing I remember.
Yeah, they are big.
Yeah, they are, no doubt. So, you've got people who have read the book and actually put things into action. And I think case studies are inspirational. And I want people to understand that they can find their landing zone. And so let's not talk about attorneys who have read it, because I want to make sure that everybody feels strongly that this book is also for them. A doctor read this, a physician?
Yes, cardiologist. And Sheila, and she's told me she's going to retire. And I've known her for a long time. And so I went by her office and autographed a copy of the book, put it in their little note and said, hope your retirement is great. You and Bob have a good time. That was in the fall. A couple of weeks ago, she called out of the blue and said, hey, would you like to have a beer? I said, sure. So I met her at the restaurant down the street, and she brings the book in with her, the dog-eared, that she's written, there's boxes in there to do these exercises, so she scribbled through those things. And she said, Bob and I are about to take our first retirement trip. We're going to have an extended stay in Florida, and I'm taking this with me because I'm not finished, but I want you to know that what you've written has been meaningful to me and helpful to me. And she didn't use the word, I'm paraphrasing, I'm a student of what you've done here because I find it helpful and I'm not finished yet. And so, my takeaway from that is that I satisfied my goal. I mean, I have a couple other stories like that, but that one is most recent, and also from somebody who's a very well-educated cardiologist. And so I had people say, oh, you've struck a chord, Kevin. An old colleague just last night emailed me, and he saw a podcast that I'd done, and he said, I didn't know you wrote a book. And so here's the Amazon link, Don, buy it. But he writes back and said, what you're talking about is a valuable subject. And so I'm always slow to believe in myself, I think, which I don't think is an uncommon thing for
Sure.
you're like
Imposter syndrome is real and humility is
Exactly.
valuable. So I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the humility side of things, but you clearly, I mean, your own life example is enough for me to know that this is real deal quality information.
no, it's fun. And I think Sheila's endorsement, if you will, was as good as any selling 100 books, right? It was a firsthand. This meant something to me, which
That's awesome.
which meant something to her, which meant something to me for her to tell me that. And it's another lesson too that I try to impress upon people is to thank the people that helped you. And so I don't know if she consciously got that message, but it's to thank your mentors, or even if they mentored you 10 years ago, to call out of the blue and say, for you to call up whoever got you into your first play or production company, say, hey, you know what? You're on my mind today, and I just want to remember you. That will make that person's day, and it'll make your day. And I did that a couple of times, and it made me regret the one or two that I missed that were looking out for me. One guy didn't promote me one time, and I was so upset. I was 21 years old and working in a wholesale flower shop, and I wanted the big truck because, man, he made money on that big truck. But my job was to get there at 6 a.m. and leave at noon, cutting flowers and getting them organized so that I could go to college.
Yeah.
George knew that, and when I applied for that job, he gave it to another guy who deserved it, really. But he did me a good turn. I wasn't smart enough then to recognize that, and when I did, he was already passed on. So Sheila, going back to that, is maybe that resonant. She called me up to say, you did me a good turn. I just wanted you to know that, and I think that's
cool.
Important for all of us to keep in mind, that we kind of get busy and you forget about the people that got you here. Nobody got anywhere by themselves.
100%. So let's help some people get to the next stage before they have the book in hand. Let's pay it forward in life. What's one tactical thing you can share right now where somebody could start working on finding their landing zone? You mentioned one thing where you had a list of 100 items that you had already thought through. Is that one of the tactical things? What could we do today?
Yeah, today you can do this, and this is in my program what I do. Write down 10 things that you would like to do, and they can be as random as anything. You want to start a garden, you want to go to Romania, you want to learn Spanish. Put them on a piece of paper. Take that list and say, okay, what are 3 of these things that I could start right now? Or I can't, and study those 3, grab one of them and say, this one I'm going to do. Take that goal and write out how you're going to do it. Put it on your calendar that it's going to be revisited. If you're going to do Duolingo to learn Spanish, I'm going to start today. Therefore, I'm going to do it 10 minutes every morning while I'm taking my walk, before I listen to Josh's podcast on my walk.
I like that plan.
and then tell people, hold yourself accountable by telling somebody that will call you out to say, hey, Josh, how's the Spanish coming? Did you do your Duolingo this week? No, I got too busy. I did this. And that's what you can do today. You can write 10 down, find one of those 10, implement that, and use that as a springboard to say, okay, now let's go to number 2 and let's build some momentum here. And it shouldn't be a daunting thing. I think the Duolingo is a good example. It's like, okay, I need to do 10 minutes a day. What are 10 minutes? I mean, it's not that much, and you can do that 10 minutes while you're doing something else, washing the dishes, walking the dog.
Yeah, can I tell you the truth right now is that I haven't done my Duolingo in like 7 or 8 days. And
I didn't mean to call you out.
No, it's great. It's great. I'm going to actually, audience, Kevin knew this about me, that I'm working on becoming better with my Spanish because I live in a largely Hispanic area, and I regret that I don't have more quality conversations with my neighbors. So I'm going to fix it over time. But it's so what you just said was so common sense when you sit back, but how often do we skip common sense? I mean, you're talking about calendaring it, making it regular in your calendar, and then sharing it with an accountability partner who you trust enough to maybe elbow you and rib you a little bit that like, you haven't done it. I know you haven't done it. You know, you don't know enough Spanish words. Here you go. Come on, buddy. It's good. It's real good.
And you make a great point. In this process of writing this book, I came across so much. I'd go to the self-help section, and I'd hide there from anybody that I knew by piling up a couple Hemingways and a couple travel books, and then I'd grab Viktor Frankl, who's sitting right next to Dr. Phil in this misnamed section, and I'd go through this stuff and say, well, I knew that. And then it's like, well, Kevin, why don't you do anything about it?
Right.
If you knew that and you thought it was a good idea, why didn't you implement that? And one of my buddies once said, he said, Kevin, there's no such thing as an original thought.
Right.
And, I thought it is out there, but it goes back to implementation. Why do you ride across the U.S.? Or why do you write a book? Why do you start a podcast series? I mean, because you wanted to, and because you did it, and that's the key.
That is the key. Yeah, taking action is everything. I'm running into a lot of younger entrepreneurs these days who are more would-be than actual entrepreneurs. And, it's my mantra on all of that is, what is the action plan? And when will you accomplish this? And I'm like, well, I don't know when I'll accomplish it. I can't predict that. Yes, actually you can.
My editor that helped me with this book told me that there's a lot of people out there. I've got this book, I've started on, and she goes, oh, really? How far along are you? And she goes, well, I haven't written anything. It's all spinning around up here. He says, no. It's not a book. It's not even the start of a book until it's on paper.
That's right.
I think to your point with an entrepreneur, until you take a couple steps, you can say you're an entrepreneur or say you're a writer or say you're an actor, but it's got to jump out of your head, right?
Yeah, I got invited to speak at a group. I'll leave the city out of it, so I'm not throwing them fully under the bus, but they were called City Movie Makers. And so I'm there to speak, and there was probably 20 or 30 people in the room, and each person goes and introduces themselves. There's enough time for them to say, hi, I'm Joe, I'm a director. Hi, I'm Mary, I'm an editor. And so we went around the room, and I took them at face value, right? They say they're a director, I believe they're a director. And so I was speaking to them as a peer, and then later on, after the networking session is happening and we're all having our spiked punch and whatever it is, and I'm finding out that they've never directed anything. They don't even own a computer to edit on. There would be, and they wish it was very Jean-Paul Sartre of them to say, I am who I will become. But my mind was just struggling to wrap around that. And so, I went back actually another time and got the privilege of talking to them because they all, their hearts were in the right place. And I did challenge them. I said, look, if you are a director who's never directed, you can fix that by directing something. Please do it.
Yeah. No, I think it's like any other walk of life where you have this aspiration, but you don't know how to start. You're timid. You need a push.
Yeah.
But if you do it, suddenly you find, okay, I am a director, or I am an inventor. But it's easy to live in your head. I get that.
It is. And it's scary to step out sometimes. It's, what will people think? You're a novice until you're an expert. And owning that reality is sometimes a little challenging. I mean, I actually have my 5-year-old right now. He is very upset when he doesn't get something perfect the first time. And so I'm the dad running around going, we failed! And Will's trying to get his head around that right now because I want him to know that failure is actually proof of trying. And trying is what matters because if you try enough, you'll stop failing and you'll start succeeding. And so 5-year-olds, right? It is what it is.
No, I'm sure like you. I mean, some of my, what at the moment looked like a great failure or disappointment turned into a magic moment that transformed my life. I was on a management committee and I lost an election. The young guys, partners, figured out a way how to knock off the older guy, and I was oh man, this is terrible. A couple hours later, I'm home having dinner with Patty. It's like, no, you just freed up your entire month of January.
Wow.
Because the management team is just swamped with budget and compensation. And so we went to friends instead of me being in these meetings, and we stumbled onto this first apartment that we talked about. Never would have happened had this fella knocked me off, and I've thanked him for it more than once. I don't see him much, but if I do again, I'll thank him once more. You know what? You changed my life, and then what you did, it moved me. It moved me off the board, and it moved me into a different direction that ended up being a valuable part of my life. And there's a book Matt Haig wrote. It's called The Midnight Library, and it's one of the lines in there has caught me, that is, if you change one little thing in your life, your entire life changes. And that, in the course of my life, there's been a whole lot of those little things. My father got transferred from Cleveland to Indianapolis. I had nothing to do with it, but it would have
Changed everything.
my life. I mean, the Army was sending me to Vietnam, and somehow me and this other group of soldiers were sent elsewhere, and I went to Germany. Now, I don't know how, but it happened. Got knocked off the board and went to France. All these little things that when you piece them together, that some you make happen, and some happen, and you need to enjoy the reward.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and when life deals you lemons, you make lemonade. I've always loved that phrase. Not that any of those stories were particularly lemons, but you have a situation that you have to deal with, and it seems like you're reasonably adept at adopting a positive attitude, which also fuels the positivity that comes from those life changes.
Well, there's others in the house that might disagree with how positive I am sometimes when these things hit. There's a little grousing that goes with it, but even then, I put this in the book. I become a little embarrassed about the grousing, and I should have been a little more mature to say, all right, this isn't the end of the world, right? Nobody got hurt.
How long do you let yourself grouse?
Oh, less and less.
Good.
Because it's not important, right? I mean, it takes, and that's one of those life lessons that I don't know. I think there's people in their 20s that have figured it out. I didn't, and I didn't in my 30s. But there is a point where it's like, I don't know, is that really important? It's not worth getting upset about.
I've actually given myself I didn't use the term grousing, but I guess this can be labeled explicit. I let myself bitch for 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes, I just have to problem solve.
Good for you.
Yeah. No, I'm very hard on myself, because otherwise I think I'd go way longer.
Yeah. One of my good friends in France, Mohammed, was a Moroccan, and he and I will take walks, and I'll say, Mohammed, I got this problem we need to talk about. He said, Kevin, he goes, it's not a problem. You need to start there. This isn't a problem. Let's talk about what the solution is. This isn't a problem.
Muhammad's a wise man.
Yeah, he's got a lot of those little sayings, and he is a wise man, and it's been fascinating to come to know him and to learn from him these little things like, okay, you're right, and this is nothing to grouse about.
That's great. I love this. So let me start landing the plane here. I'll keep landing things here. Find your landing zone. I know it's available on Amazon. I know you can even find it on Target.com. What's the best way? I want two best ways. One, to find the book, but also I know that you are a speaker. You're able to coach people on this. You actually can be directly engaged. How does somebody who needs to wrap their head around their career decisions and their future find this?
The easiest one is if you get on Amazon and type in Kevin McGoff, the book will pop up. It's on the American Bar Association website, Target website, Barnes & Noble website. And also, I like hearing from people like I did from Sheila. It's Kevin, McGoff, McGoff, the number 1 at gmail.com. And I have a website as well that you can find my name. It's Sur la Route, which means on the road, SurLaRouteKM.com.
Okay.
And that's got the book. It has my travel stories that I've had published and some other things that I've written there. And so lots of ways to find me. And in this world today, there's other Kevin McGoffs out there, but
I'm sure there are. Yeah.
So this has been a lot of fun, Josh. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah, I really enjoy my time with you too, and we're going to do more of this. I've learned that everybody at some point comes to Orlando, Florida. It's just that tourism central destination. So the next time you happen to be down here, we'll go grab a beer like you do with your friends. And also I'll say publicly, I'll hold myself accountable. My very good friend, Jordan Ostroff, has been on the show. I think I sent you a link to his episode.
Yeah, no,
and you guys are kindred spirits. I seriously, everything that you've done in your life and your career, he has similarities. And I think the two of you are going to be fast friends. So Jordan, you're going to meet Kevin. I'm going to make that introduction. And if you're an attorney who is inspired by this, obviously Kevin has put his contact information out there. Directly reach out. But if you're in some kind of a pivot, you're maybe in a personal crisis, like, hey, I'm aging and I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. This is the type of content. It's funny, Kevin. I was thinking about this and I didn't get to it, but when I was a kid, everybody asked me, what are you going to be when you grow up? And they stopped asking because I think everybody thinks I grew up. I still got more to be.
Good for you.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I use that phrase all the time, and I think that I like how you put that. You still have more to be.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, an important mindset to have, that I'm not done yet. I mean, there's no reason you don't have to be done. Right.
Right. No, we don't have to be done. We don't. But we do have to be done with this episode. And so, hey, it's Josh Pye. I'm hitting my own microphone here. And this has been Bootstrapped Unicorns. I do want you to go find this book, Find Your Landing Zone by Kevin McGoff. You owe it to yourself and your family to find purpose in life. And if you're feeling like you've got purpose at work, but you don't have purpose for yourself and your family going forward, this can help you unlock it. And you deserve that, and your family deserves that. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't reintroduce the truth that we are now a sponsored podcast. And one of our sponsors is Hire VP. Scott Ramage is the CEO there. And we are proud users of Hire VP's services. We have 2 virtual professionals on staff that we have integrated as part of our team. If you need to understand how to bring on virtual assistants, is the term that you're probably used to hearing, but virtual professionals, we would gladly help you understand that, and we can tell our story. But we really want to connect you with Scott and his team over at Hire VP. Now, if you also know Scott, you might know that they used to be known as Media Machine. Well, Media Machine has rebranded. They are Hire VP. We are proud of our team members. They are absolutely integrated fully into our business, and they are part of our team, even though we use Hire VP as the resource to help find them and manage kind of the back end stuff, the HR life, with integrating them into our world. But your business needs to grow, and some of the people you have to hire have to be in person and on site, and some of the people you have to hire can log in virtually and really empower your growth in ways that I bet you don't even know are possible. So reach out to us here at Bootstrapped Unicorns and C47 Films. We'll coach you and teach you the right way and connect you to Hire VP. If you reach out to them directly, tell them Josh Pye sent you. They know what to do. This has been Bootstrapped Unicorns. Upcoming on a near episode, we are recording this next week, the former CEO of Blockbuster is going to be on, James Keys. I don't know what episode number it will be, but watch for that. He was also CEO of 7-Eleven, but James has a new book coming out. He's a super cool dude. He's also a pilot, so we can talk about air travel and his adventures flying his planes. But I want to know what the hell happened to Blockbuster. He's got a great story there. I've heard a little bit of it, but he's going to help us understand that. And he's also going to talk a lot about education. He's passionate about it. So we'll see you on an upcoming episode. We will share that great experience with you. And until then, go slay the day.